like to call this meeting to order. First, I'd like to announce that this meeting is being recorded and ask if there's anyone in the audience who's also recording this meeting. Seeing none, if we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no public comment tonight. Under our first presentation, we have the Purple Heart Town designation by the Department of Massachusetts Military Order of the Purple Heart. And I would like to invite Mr. Agnew up to the podium with State Representative Paul Frost and Senator Michael Moore, if you would join them, please.
Yes, my name is Leo Agnew. I'd like to introduce members of our department, which is Joe Gianduso, Tom Terrian, and chapter of Western Mass 875 Brian Lett and his two assistants. Before we make our presentation, I'd like to have Senator Moore and Representative Frost make their presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. It's nice to see everyone again. In recognition of the town of Auburn actually seeking this status, I would just want to thank you and congratulate you for recognizing or taking the opportunity to recognize all your veterans. I think this really shows the importance that we place on it today in the town of Auburn, and I think in the United States and Massachusetts. And in honor of what you're doing, I have from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts a citation from the State Senate. Be it known that the Massachusetts Senate hereby extends its congratulations to the town of Auburn in recognition of being designated a Purple Heart town by the Department of Massachusetts Military Order of the Purple Heart. And be it further known that the Massachusetts Senate extends best wishes for continued success, that this citation be duly signed by the President of the Senate and attested to, and a copy thereof transmitted by the Clerk of the Senate. It's signed by the Senate President Teresa Murray, myself, Senator Moore, and again, congratulations, because again, this is something that the town sought out, and it wasn't an organization coming to the town. So congratulations, and thank you for recognizing our veterans.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the Auburn Board of Selectmen, and to the entire town of Auburn. I wish to just congratulate you on this recognition, to thank you for honoring our veterans, and especially those who were wounded or killed in combat, as the Purple Heart recognizes. And I know that now the town of Auburn every year, in accordance with receiving this, will recognize all our Purple Heart veterans here in Auburn and across the Commonwealth, across this great nation. I know Auburn deeply cares about the veterans of this community, and again, across our land, and does everything they can for them. And so I appreciate that, and I also want to recognize you with a citation as well for being honored with the Purple Heart designation and becoming a Purple Heart town. Congratulations to the town of Auburn, and thank you to all our veterans out there for all the service you've given us to keep our country free and our democracy alive. God bless.
Thank you, Representative.
Welcome to the Purple Heart communities. On behalf of Military Order Purple Heart and Department of Massachusetts, we'd like to present the town of Auburn a certificate of acknowledgement, becoming a Purple Heart town. Being designated a town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to be known as the Purple Heart community, honoring all veterans who have made the ultimate sacrifice and shed their blood defending our country in all wars. From Auburn, Mass. And honoring August 7th as Purple Heart Day. We'd like to present this to the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. If we could, we'd like to get a group photo.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to do a couple acknowledgements. Before we take a brief recess to do a couple photos, I do want to acknowledge the members of the Veterans Advisory Committee who are here, as well as our Veterans Agent Larry Corbin, and veterans from the American Legion Post. Thank you all for your service. Thank you for being here. And for those of you who aren't aware, we have a fabulous Purple Heart monument which recognizes our Purple Heart recipients here in Auburn at Prospect Park. And when the weather gets warmer, I encourage you to go there and visit it. It's absolutely an emotional experience. So thank you all for being here. And we're going to just take a brief recess. We're in recess just to do a couple pictures. We'll do it by the flag here, guys. I call this meeting back to order. Our next item was a motor vehicle Class 3 and Class 2 and auto repair license for Mansfield Auto LLC at 160 Southbridge Street. The hearing was advertised and posted, but the applicant has withdrawn his application. So if that's rescheduled, you'll be properly notified. The next item we have is the fiscal year 2015 budget. Mr. Kazanovich, welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to make my way to the podium, but there is a hand that I gave to the board members. It's a mirror image of the presentation I'm going to give tonight. And for those of you who may be interested in a copy, there's some on the table as well.
He's sick, so we don't want him breathing on him.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I am happy to report to you tonight that we are recommending a balanced budget tonight for fiscal year 2015. The budget recommendation will show a total estimated revenues $55,853,981. Total expenses totaling $55,851,105. A current unobligated balance of $2,876. What I didn't make part of the presentation that each and every board member has are supporting details for each and every category that was submitted in your packet, as well as further detail by way of budgetary line items by department in your 3-ring binder. As you can see, once again, total appropriations of $55.8 million. Total revenue sources, and I'll get into each one of these as we move along. $55.8 million. Total unobligated of roughly $876. This would give us excess levy. It would grow to a level of $3.2 million. Here's the change from current year to recommended for 15. Local receipts is flat-lined, level funded at this point. Cherry sheet revenue reflects a 2.46% increase. Tax levy, increase of 3.04. Don't let that be misleading because new growth comes into that calculation. Actually show tax levy utilization of 1.70. Debt exclusion, just shy of 1%. An available fund reduction of 7.08%. Total revenue increase of 2.06%. In terms of revenue tax levy, the annual amount of growth allowed under Prop 2.5 would allow us to tax at an additional $908,481. We're not using that full amount. What we are using is 1.25% for our operational side of the budget. That equals $454,241. It uses 0.25% in accordance with our adopted financial plan towards our capital budget of $90,848. And it uses 0.15% for the cost of the new Bay Path Vocational Regional Technical High School at about $72,000, with the balance of 0.80 being applied towards our excess levy, which is $290,000 and $714. This budget, once again, only utilizes $400,000 of new growth. Once again, as stipulated in the financial policies, our five-year average for new growth from 2010 to present year is $559,110. So that excess, if we should still maintain that five-year growth average, we could use to mitigate our, against the tax levy that we have earmarked of 1.70. This budget estimates on the cherry sheet side, the governor's recommended budget, that level funds local aid at FY14 level. We are seeing an increase in Chapter 70 by $248,000 over current year actual under the governor's budget. Under the governor's budget, we have reduced state charges and assessments by $67,251. We believe at this point in time that this would be the conservative of all three numbers, given the fact that state revenue is running at about $1.1 billion ahead of current year projections. We are hearing there may be a move afoot by both the House and the Senate to adopt a joint resolution to support, at a minimum, the governor's recommended budget for state aid. On local receipts side, we are level funded based on FY14 tax recapped approved values. These estimates remain conservative in accordance with our adopted financial policies. We would be willing to, or we will be monitoring this, but won't know the actuals for 14 until June 30th. This would give us an opportunity at the fall town meeting to make any corrections, whether up or down, in the area of local receipts. On our available fund on the revenue side, once again, we have a reduction in the utilization of free cash and overlay surplus to fund our operating budget. This would be year 2 reduction of a year 3 planned-in phase that would eliminate the use of funding from free cash and overlay. That phase-out is to be completed in next year's budget, 2016. We are using $65,000 of free cash and overlay from a current $130,000 in FY14. This budget in 15 uses the remaining balance of the Dr. Arthur and Martha Pappas $1 million donation for the debt and interest of the $4.5 million Pappas Recreational Complex. We have a balance of about $31,000 that will be used in FY15. Beyond that, the town assumes 100% of the debt and interest on the remaining balance of the debt and interest until the debt is retired. This budget utilizes as a one-time payment $450,000 out of our stabilization fund, which has a balance of about $2.3 million, towards the acquisition of a new fire tower truck. The truck is presently 20 years old, recently had some major work done to it. We've been told that the remaining life expectancy of that truck is about 3, at most 5 years. We've incorporated that into the CIP plan starting in FY15. The total purchase price of that truck is $980,000, $450,000 to be paid up front, with the remaining balance to be financed over a 5 to 7 or 10-year period. That term is to be determined based upon rates that we can get for each one of those options. On the expense side of the budget, this budget provides funding to meet all of our labor contractual obligations. This recommendation before you tonight does not include any new positions on the town side. Although there are requests made by the departments for new positions, some which I'd like to highlight now. 2 patrol on the police side. Patrol has been down 2 positions ever since the height of their staffing when a 2.5 override was passed. to fund an additional 6 positions at the police department. A recommendation came in from the fire chief for 4 firefighters' positions to meet current minimum standards, and for increased hours in Department of Inspectional Services and by way of clerical hours. The school department budget before you tonight, the recommendation is for a 2.96% increase, although their request and voted by the school committee was for a 3.53% increase. At 3.53, that budget would have created the equivalent of 7 new full-time positions in the FY15 budget. The town administration recommendation at 2.96, or an increase of $660,672, falls short of their request by $127,476. The impact of those new 7 positions is unknown at this time. The school department will be taking up this matter at their meeting scheduled, I believe, for March 12th. This budget maintains a level of snow and ice consistent with FY14 amended funding. The fall town meeting increased the snow and ice budget by $50,000. This budget before you tonight maintains that level of funding at $299,850. Roadway reconstruction is level funded at $525,000. This budget now provides general fund revenues to meet CIP roadway improvement funding, which historically has been funded through bond proceeds. The CIP capital request earmarks general fund revenues to meet that obligation not only in this year but in future years as well. And once again, OPEB, other post-employment benefits for the 3rd straight year will be funded at a level of $500,000. This budget presently has no earmark for stabilization. We would consider funding for stabilization at the fall town meeting once other revenue sources are known and are approved by the state, as well as when we close the fiscal year, we'll have a better handle on our revenue source at that time as well. This budget uses this 6 months of healthcare reform. As you know, in FY14, we had a 6-month savings. 6 months of that additional savings was applied to 15. Once those savings were deducted, we did a 5% increase, which is the market industry average that we've been told by our advisors. I can tell you Millbury recently had a quote of about 9.5% increase on their health. We are running a very favorable, in terms of claims, we are very favorable in terms of our ratio. We're hopeful that that may lead to a lower than a 5% estimated increase in our health insurance for FY15. We also made an allowance for those new positions on the group health insurance side. New positions, 7 new positions could come at a cost of upwards of $130,000, in addition to any vacancies that may become available through retirement. We have to cover the cost not only of our retirees, but also the new positions that fill those positions as well. In terms of debt and interest, all of our middle school debt and interest-related costs will be handled outside of the levy limit as a result of the debt exclusion vote that was passed. All other long-term capital costs will be addressed at a borrowing scheduled for September of 14. This budget includes a 6-month interest payment on an anticipated bonding that will take place in September with an approximate value of about $3 million. General fund, once again, is absorbing more of the capital costs in accordance with our financial plan to reduce our debt burden in accordance with our financial policies, which represents approximately 1/10 of 2.5%. That earmark is dedicated strictly for capital in this budget. And we are currently preparing a short-term borrowing to meet our cash flow needs for the New Auburn Middle School. We have ratings scheduled for Moody's and Standard & Poor's in mid-March, which will hopefully lead to a favorable rating review and with a potential possibility of an increase in our bond rating. Here is a list of the priorities that were not met in the recommended budget at this time. We wanted to identify these costs in the event that some funds should become available and would allow us to review the budgets one more time. This is part of your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions relative to any of these, but the details are in your packet. Total priorities of about $607,000. Once again, to budget the FY15 recommended budget before you tonight, it identifies revenues at $55,853,981. Total expenses at $55,851,105. Total unobligated, $2,876. Madam Chair, members of the board, that concludes my presentation for tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions relative to the recommendation before you.
Great, thank you. Do members have questions? Mr. Holstrom?
First off, I'd like to say thank you for your hard work and your diligence in this. Sounds like a balanced budget coming forward in this age and time is well looked upon, and I do appreciate all the hard work that you've done to be able to put it to us. One of the questions I do have, though, is $950,000 for a new fire tower truck. That's quite a chunk of change for the upcoming years. Are there any other departments or any other large expenditures we can foresee in the near future that we are going to be spending this kind of money or equipment coming forward?
We try to capture all of our capital needs through our five-year capital plan. Certainly, we've been able to identify, through some amendments proposed by the school committee, some capital costs associated with the renovation of the new middle school. This honestly came up roughly 2 years ago, Chief. The matter went before the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee asked Town Administration to make this a priority, which we did over the course of the next cycle. Certainly, that was the intent of building up stabilization, so we could address these one-time needs. We anticipate that we would like to continue to contribute to our stabilization to meet any other future needs that may bubble up kind of quickly. But for the most part, our capital needs are addressed through the five-year plan.
Thank you.
Mr. Simonian?
What is the remaining balance on the Pappas complex?
Roughly $31,000. We've used $960,000 towards payment of debt and interest over the last 3
I thought the
years.
slide said there would be a balance after we use that 31,000.
No.
So that there,
After the $31,000, that's a remaining balance of the $1 million. We assume 100% of the debt and interest going forward for the remaining term of the bond issue.
right, so what is that amount?
The payment is roughly $400-some-odd-thousand per year
For
debt and interest.
how long?
Probably another 5 years. This is year one, so we're actually absorbing, and we knew this because we've actually retired some debt, and because of that retired debt, we earmarked that towards the payment of the Pappas complex.
So what will be the funding mechanism to pay for that as we pay off that last 5 years?
General fund revenues.
All right. Okay, thanks.
Anything else, Mr. Simonian?
Well, I guess since we've discussed this before, this would be the time since it's come.
Well, Mr. Grossman has questions. Did you have more questions?
No, I don't have any more
Okay,
questions.
Mr. Grossman had his
Okay,
hand
I'd
up.
just like to bring up the point, in the conditions and the times that we're in, to be looking at, and I know we would like it, and we're short, and we're short 2 police officers. The fire department's looking for 4 more people. The school department's looking for 7 more people. That's only going to increase the taxes for the citizens in town, and we should look very closely at assigning these positions to these departments at this time.
I'd just like to make one comment. I just want to remind the board, although we're at 1.70 out of 2.5 currently, last year when we presented the budget, we were at 1.68. We ultimately got it down to 1.14. So we're looking for ways to mitigate the amount we are charging through taxation, through other revenue sources, if they should become available, whether it be new growth or any other revenue that may be in addition to what we're estimating right now.
Mr. Simonian?
But I actually do have one more question, kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Grossman said. Maybe this would be a question better for the superintendent, but going forward, since we know that there's going to be some consolidation of schools, will there be, is there a plan, or do we know if there's going to be a staff reduction as the schools are consolidated? Seems like there would be, but I don't know if that's been discussed.
Actually, that did come up during our discussions when we met with the school department on their budget. They are looking at that presently to see what the impacts are going to be as a result of the consolidation. So we don't have any information for you at this point in time. That may be a question that you may want to ask the superintendent, or the finance committee may want to ask the superintendent. I don't think that's going to come together in the coming weeks. It may be a little further out.
No, I understand. It just seems that maybe it makes more sense to, and I know this is probably better for the superintendent, but I guess I would rather maybe struggle a little bit than to add staff only to have to let people go. That's kind of a lousy thing to have to do. But, again, I guess I can address those questions to the superintendent as well.
They may choose to handle that through attrition, so that when people are retiring out of the system, they may not fill those positions. I can't speak for the superintendent, but that may be an option that they would consider.
I have a question on the budget priorities page, the not recommended at this time. I think it's the last page, right? So are those in order of priority, or how will you handle those?
No, these are not in order of priority. These are needs that were identified through our budget deliberations, and we committed to putting them on the radar screen to at least let the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee know that these needs have been requested.
Thank you. Mr. Simonian?
While we're on that slide, the increased clerical hours for the Department of Inspectional Services, I know that we've had some discussions in at least the last 12 months about issues in that department with not meeting some of the inspections. Is that going to have an impact on that, or are we going to continue to be behind? I know it says clerical, but does that have an impact on us meeting those inspectional requirements?
I don't think it's going to have an impact on meeting the inspectional requirements, because I know we have certainly some new hires in the department that are increasing the activity. This is more of an admin support issue that we are reviewing and looking at different options that may allow us to increase the support by utilizing some current personnel within general government.
Is there anything else? Anything else? Did you want to?
The only thing I wanted to add, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Kazanovich for all the work that he does on this budget. We've been meeting with department heads since the end of December to put together the budget, the capital improvement, for the CIP plan. And again, I think it bears repeating that the budget that we presented tonight on the operational side is a 1.25% of 2.5, which has been the general direction of the board over the last couple of years. So that is where we started. As Ed mentioned, when you add in the .25 for capital per the financial plans, and then you add in the Bay Path, it does come to the 1.70, which pretty much parallels what we did last year. As you mentioned, last year we were at 1.68, and we got it down to 1.14. The prior year, we were actually at 1.25, and we got it down to 0%. So there are opportunities that we're looking at as we get firmer numbers throughout the next couple months. There are possibilities for reducing this, but we also want to make it clear that there may be some priorities that we should be funding as opposed to reducing it. So those discussions will take place with the Finance Committee. And just one last reminder, we always make our recommendation for the stabilization account at the fall town meeting. So this is standard practice. We don't put a recommendation for stabilization in now because we don't have the final numbers from the state, and we want to make sure that our final revenue numbers are right. So I think it bears repeating. Should anyone ask, the stabilization, there is nothing in there now. It is never proposed at this time of year. It's always proposed in the fall.
Thank you. Is there anything else?
One more quick question, through the chair. What's the foresight for the state for numbers in the fall? Does it look up? Does it look down?
Quite honestly, I was hopeful that the governor's budget would reflect a larger increase, not only in Chapter 70, but in unrestricted local aid, given that the state is running at a $1.1 billion ahead of estimates. No reason to believe that that trend isn't going to continue, although I believe the governor has other ideas for that money by way of transportation, capital infrastructure, and things of that nature. And but the House and Senate may have some different ideas, and we won't know. At least probably the House numbers will probably be released at the end of March. Senate to follow sometime in April. At that point, this budget is going to be well underway before the Finance Committee. That's something we're going to have to revisit, I think, at a fall town meeting. I think it would be too tight to reconsider anything for the annual town meeting. So we don't know. I mean, we're listening. Hopefully, we'll get some good news from the Commonwealth. But what we're seeing in terms of revenue growth is very positive, something we haven't seen in prior years, that can only bode well for the municipalities throughout the Commonwealth of Mass.
Thank you.
So before we vote to transmit the budget, I just want to recognize all the department and division heads who are here tonight for this budget presentation, and also Chairman Kevin Hussey of the Finance Committee, who's been doing a lot of work already, and I expect he'll roll up his sleeves and have his committee ready Wednesday for this budget transmission. So, Mr. Simonian.
Yeah, before we make a motion to transmit the budget, I would like to propose another motion. We brought this up, and unfortunately, it was too late in the budget cycle last year to do so, but I'd like this board to adopt a policy where if the Board of Selectmen continues or at any time closes the tax rate, the town would bear the cost of that and not have it be a tax increase to the residents. Said it needed to be done before the budget was sent this year, so I'm proposing it now in the form of a motion.
Is there a second?
Not following what you're saying.
Well, if you want to second it for discussion, otherwise
I'll second it for discussion.
Well, every year we've had the discussion about we closed the tax rate, moving closer to a single tax rate, and the cost of that is borne by the residents in the form of a tax increase. So I would like to have the board adopt a policy where that burden falls on the town to build it into the budget rather than have it be a tax increase to the residents. I mean, just this past year, there were several arguments in support of, not closing it as much as we have in the past because of the burden to the residents, so why not just remove it altogether?
Okay. So on the motion, and actually now I'm a little bit clearer as well. So we would have to hold this motion. If you want, we can proceed with this motion, but we couldn't adopt a policy tonight per our own policy. We can't adopt a policy, but we can send it to the subcommittee and come back with a written policy, and if you want to make a different motion regarding this specific budget without it being a policy, you can do that, but we can't adopt a policy. So if you would include your motion to ask that it be sent to the subcommittee and back to this
No,
board
that's
for a
fine.
vote.
I'll amend the motion to say, to send it to the subcommittee first. So, I mean,
And come back for a vote.
this would be one of our financial policies, not necessarily a Board of Selectmen policy.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I think the board would have to make a decision on what position it's going to take relative to the tax classification hearing now, well in advance, because if you take that, how do you know how your members are going to vote in November after we've gone to a fall town meeting? There's no way to make the correction. So I think you'd have to have a tax classification hearing in September and set an early tax rate in order for the board to react in town administration to offset that reduction by way of a cut in the budget.
Well, we had talked about moving that up anyway, moving that timetable up anyway, so I don't,
But some of that is beyond our control. Certifications that come out of the Department of Revenue, some years haven't come, it's submitted on a timely basis, but may not come to us till October. Cindy?
so I guess I'm not following what the difficulty is.
If you're suggesting that any migration towards a single tax rate resulting in a burden on the residential homeowner be made by way of cuts in the budget, the board needs to know what direction it's going in now so it can make a corresponding cut in the operational side of the budget to offset that. Move it down towards a single tax rate.
So,
Your board takes, the board took a vote November 14th-ish.
Right.
You need to know how the board is positioned now in order for a corresponding cut to happen in the budget.
Why, this budget won't be final until, what, end of June, beginning of July?
The budget will be final in a fall town meeting, October. But your classification hearing won't happen until November.
So, I don't understand why.
How are you going to know how your fellow board members are going to vote?
I wouldn't until, but that's my question. What is the difficulty in moving the tax classification hearing from November to September? Or even a couple weeks before fall town meeting?
Well, if you have a fall town meeting, you have to open up the warrant, and you have to give 2 weeks' notice to town meeting members. So it's really 45 days before you go to town meeting that you open up the warrant. So you're almost talking late August, beginning of September. You'd have to have a tax classification hearing in September.
and if I may, what would happen to the work that's gone into this budget and the steps that the Finance Committee takes if you moved forward with the budget as presented tonight and transmitted the way it is tonight, and a vote was taken by this board at some point to move up the tax class, not only move up the tax classification hearing, but that would be assuming that this board supported Mr. Simonian's motion as well.
Then the budgets would have to be revisited, and corresponding reductions would have to be made at a fall town meeting.
So I just want to, Sharon, what do we have for a motion on the floor? Because I'm not really, because you had said this isn't a policy, you want to include it in the financial policy, so I just need to be clear on the motion unless you want to withdraw it and make another motion.
Without the policy language, it's a motion, if the Board of Selectmen closes the tax rate during the tax classification hearing, the town would bear the brunt of the increase and not the resident. Is that?
Yeah, basically.
Is that your motion?
It's, in the form of a tax increase, the burden is put on the residents.
Okay, so Mr. Grossman seconded it for discussion. Mr. Holstrom, you had your hand up?
From what I'm hearing now, and what I'm understanding, I think any kind of policy or any kind of restrictions we give to the town administration for the budget process will be a very, very difficult stance for them, and I would be very much against limiting any actions or of the operation of the administration. I wouldn't support this.
Mr. Simone and then Mr. Grossman.
There's always a way that things can be made to work. So the argument here seems to be that it would be too hard because it's too much work and there's too many things that have to change. That seems to be the brunt of the argument, that we have to change the way we've been doing things, so let's just keep doing it the same way, which doesn't make much sense to me.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it's a timing issue.
I realize that, but
If it's the board's intent to cut the budget to offset a movement towards a single tax rate, it needs to make that decision now.
right now, tonight,
So it can be incorporated in the budget, that way you know a cut will allow you to compress the tax rate.
okay, so essentially in the fall, when I first proposed this, you stated that because the budget was already done and approved by town meeting, we would have to wait until the budget, this budget came up in the spring for discussion. Now it's coming up for discussion, and the paradox here seems to be that you need a decision tonight. However, our policy stands in the way of that because we can't vote to create that policy tonight. So essentially, it's a bureaucratic paradox that
No,
prevents us
no,
from actually.
You're the one that used the word policy. If you don't want it, if you're not asking us to vote on a policy, and you're just making a motion regarding the budget tonight,
Then we would
we
have to
can
do
vote
it
on
every
that.
year. If it's not a policy.
Or you could, sometime after this meeting, including, at our next meeting, we can adopt that policy.
Now, I think at the last tax classification hearing, there was a suggestion that 400 and some odd thousand dollars be cut out of the budget, which was the FY14 budget. We don't have the ability to do that. We already went to town meeting, we had to set a tax rate.
Understood.
So in terms of the current year budget, if there's a suggestion to cut that value out of the FY15 budget before you tonight, that motion could be made, and then town administration would have to revisit the budgets and make the corresponding cuts, knowing that the board wants to do this as an offset to compress the tax rate for the upcoming fall, for the FY15 tax bills.
So if you need an answer tonight, then I guess I will change the motion to ask that we vote on that tonight, and then at some point down the road, I'll ask to create the policy.
Okay. Well, I think the way Sharon read it back, we hadn't included the policy language anyway, correct?
I took out the policy.
Okay. Mr. Grossman?
Based on hearing all of the discussion that's gone on in the last 10 minutes, I think we should continue on the same basis that we have when it comes time in the year to look at the valuations and so on and make the adjustment in the tax rate. We can't afford to do a single tax rate and the town absorb it all at one time, or the citizens absorb it all at one time. It's too costly. I think we should continue in the same manner that we're in right now.
Mr. Simonian?
I'm not asking to go to a single tax rate all at once. I'm saying the progression has been typically 0.05. This year, I think it was 0.03. But either way, as we've closed, there's been some value associated with closing that gap, and that value has been borne by the residents in the form of a tax increase. And you yourself just brought up the argument about things being what they are economically, so proposing a way to try and alleviate some of that burden to the taxpayers by having the town absorb whatever that amount we closed the rate is, rather than have the residents, in the form of a tax increase, bear that burden. I mean, I don't know whatever it was sometime in the 80s, I don't know what the board's reason for going to a split tax rate is, but we, for the most part, we've agreed that, it's helped businesses to close it and help the residents by default as more businesses have come back to Auburn and paid more into the tax base. So it has its good and its bad points. It is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways, and we all realize that. We're residents, we pay taxes too, but at the same time, we have the opportunity to possibly alleviate one tax increase.
Mr. Holstrom?
One question through the chair. I guess we haven't got a number to sit on about what the town would absorb. If we use a $400,000 figure, and I know you haven't got calculations in front of you, but we're at 1.7% with your budget now. Where would we go if the town had to absorb that? That would still go back to the taxpayers. The taxpayers would wind up paying that in anyway, wouldn't they?
Well, if you look at the presentation tonight, 1.25% is roughly $454,000. So it would neutralize 1.25 out of 1.70. So you would still be taxing at like 0.50 of 2.5.
The town would absorb that. The residents would, or the taxpayers would absorb that. We'd have to get it from someplace.
Well, we would have to cut $454,000 out of the budget. So you're not taxing at 1.7, you're lowering that. There would still be a slight tax rate increase.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have something else?
Yeah, just, we're not talking about something that's gonna last forever either. Eventually, we will get to a single tax rate, and then there won't be any need to do it after that, unless sometime in the future, the board decides to split the tax rate again. So, we're at what, 1.22? If we went, roughly to 0.5, we're talking about 4 more years of the town absorbing this. And I'd be, whatever the vote is tonight, going forward with the policy, I'd be happy to, have conversations with, the finance committee about, potential changes to the, making the policy a little easier, if there are times when the state's, if the state has a massive cut, obviously it's gonna hurt us, so, wouldn't be smart in those times to do something like that. So I'd be willing to, have that conversation, but I just think it's something that absolutely can be done for, for the residents.
Before we vote, I just want to say that, I feel that this budget is in line with the financial policies that have been adopted and are in place now. There are just too many what-ifs. We don't know what a future board in September, October, November, whenever we have the tax classification hearing, may vote. They may vote not to close that gap. They may vote to put it to 0, or they may vote to go further with the spread. So there's just too many what-ifs for me.
Madam Chair, move the question.
Okay, so we'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Of moving the question.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes. So we're at the vote on Mr. Simonian's motion. All those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed?
No.
No. Yeah, the manager wants to be heard.
I just want to add something, and I know the vote's already been taken, but just to clarify this, and I think what we're trying to say is the administration's willing to listen to the board's direction on how we need to go on the budget. But the reason we need that answer now, we would need a dollar amount. We wouldn't, you couldn't even make a motion, you couldn't even make a policy down the road that says that the budget will absorb whatever that reduction is, because that reduction is not known until 6, 7, 8 months, actually 11 months after the budget is actually built. So the budget starts being put together in January. We wouldn't know about it until November of the following year. So you would have to say a specific dollar reduction that you would be looking for the budget, and that would be presuming that the board of the following fall would actually be making steps to reduce the CIP shift, and to shift that burden. We don't know what the board will be doing in the fall, or, as the chair just said, the board may not make that move, or at what rate would they be making that reduction? So we would be making reductions, we can't make reductions on a dollar that we don't know. So just want to mention, for purposes of policy, it can't be generic that would say that the town budget needed to absorb a reduction based on a vote, because the budget is set 11 months prior to that vote being taken. It would have to be a specific dollar amount.
Mr. Simonian?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a sense, that seems to contradict what Mr. Kazanovich said, because he said if we took a vote right now, it would be due.
That's exactly what
So,
I'm saying.
you know, you can play the what-if game all day long. What if this happens, what if that happens? We do that every year with the budget. What if the House does this? What if the Senate does that? I mean, the point is, we've found creative ways to do so many other things with the budget, and yet, this one, we just can't seem to make happen. I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to give the manager the last word on this.
Through the chair, I'm not trying to play any games, but what I'm trying to say is, we would just need a specific dollar amount. We can't have a vote that would tell us to reduce the budget in the future based on whatever a future board would vote. What I'm
Understood.
saying is, we would need to know the dollar amount, which is what Mr. Kavinovich was saying for this evening. We would need to know that amount tonight, because based on the charter and the bylaws, this budget needs to be voted on by the board and sent to the finance committee by a certain time, correct? So that's why it would have to be a specific dollar amount. We're not saying it can't be done, we're saying what we need is a specific dollar amount. So that's what I was trying to clarify.
Is there a motion to transmit the budget to the Finance Committee in accordance with the town charter and bylaws?
So, second.
We've had discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kazanovich. Our next item is under correspondence. We have an email from a Millbury resident, Terry Burke Dotson, who has requested to come before the Board of Selectmen to discuss sending a letter of support for Glass-Steagall. It would be my recommendation to the board not to allow Ms. Burke Dotson to come before this board for several reasons. The first being she's not an Auburn resident, and no Auburn resident has contacted us about this issue. It is a federal issue, which isn't before this board, and even if we were to address the federal issue, all of our federal legislators already support Glass-Steagall. And the third issue, and I feel strongly about this, is she is an announced candidate for state representative who, in her announcement, made this her only platform issue, and so I just feel that it wouldn't be right of this board to allow her to come in as an announced candidate to discuss the one issue that she's running on. Mr. Holstrom?
I make a motion, we take no action on this.
Second.
So under discussion, we would have to contact Ms. Burke Dotson and let her know that we're not taking any action. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Thank you. Under Board of Selectmen general items, in your packet, I'm not sure if I know we have a policy regarding renewals and new licenses, but it was an oversight on the town's part because they had so many licenses. We have an application for Fuller Automotive Incorporated Motor Vehicle Class 2 license at 505 Washington Street. We do have comments from DCG. It would have gone to DCG whether it was a new application or a renewal. And again, it was an oversight on the town's part because there were several licenses and this one wasn't sent in. Is there anyone here for this? I know we had said they didn't need to be. Okay. Do any board members have any questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Simonian?
So this was
It should have been on our annual renewal list.
the town.
And we left it off.
And, yeah, so, and then with the number of licenses that they have, Mr. Fuller came in, and once we realized the oversight, the town took the action, and DCG still reviewed it, because we review all annual licenses.
So have these conditions changed from the previous?
They're the standard conditions that would go on our class. They're
As long
the,
as they're aware, that's fine.
yes.
I'd make a motion to approve the license, provided all applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said license subject to all the conditions stated upon it, and failure to comply with any and all the conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void, and with the conditions of the DCG to be placed on the license.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Thank you. The next item we have is a one-day beer and wine license, and the applicant is Shane Senior. Is Shane here? Good evening, welcome. If you can come up to the podium, please. Hi.
Hi, good evening.
If you can just tell us a little bit about why you're here
Sure.
tonight?
I'm requesting a one-day beer and wine permit or liquor license. We're having our second annual St. Joseph's Gala Saturday, March 8th, from 6 to 10 p.m., just down the road at the Parish Center. There'll be dinner, dancing. Again, we're requesting a permit for beer and wine. We expect 30 to 50 people, and we'd also request a one-time waiver of the fee, if that's possible. We understand that a tip-certified bartender will be required. We have somebody. We have the tip certification. We met with DCG to understand their requirements, and after we did it last year, we understand what's expected.
Okay. So, I don't know if you're aware that we don't have the tip certification in our packet, so if the license...
I do have that with me.
Okay, that would be great. If you could give it to Sharon, she can make copies, because that would need to be
Absolutely.
included.
We have a question.
Mr. Holstrom?
Through the chair, the application we have in front of us, it's a one-day liquor license, and then liquor was crossed out in beer and wine, so I guess I want to know what we're voting on, whether it's liquor or beer and wine.
It's beer and wine,
Beer and wine.
absolutely.
Beer and wine. So we'll note that for be sure we have that on the application, that it's for beer and wine only.
Are there any other questions?
And the time is going to be 6 to 10 p.m.?
6 to 10, yes.
And the conditions that the DCG put on, as far as having a certified crowd manager in attendance and Board of Health permits associated with the event and the building and fire inspectors, that's all?
Yes, I'm in contact with Darlene and Nicholas Antanovica, and I'm the certified crowd manager. I got my credentials or certification last year, and those are good for another 4 years.
So if you could just provide a copy of that as well, to be included in the packet.
Nicholas has that, but I'll
Okay.
get that from
Okay, great. Are there any other questions, comments? Is there any public question or comment? I'll entertain a motion.
And I can make a motion to approve the license, provided all applicable requirements of the state, town, any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said license is subject to all the conditions stated upon it. Failure to comply with any and all conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void, with the conditions of the DCG placed on the license.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Is there a motion regarding the request to waive the fee?
Motion to request the waiver of the fee.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Thanks. Have a great event. Next, we have gift acceptance to the Fire Department gift account from Joan Cassidy in the amount of $100.
Motion to accept with gratitude.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. We also have to the Police Department gift account from Joan Cassidy as well in the amount of $100.
Motion to accept with gratitude.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. Let's see. Just before we continue with the Board of Selectmen items, I may hold number 5, our own goals. Is there anyone here who's for an agenda item? I want to keep everyone waiting. Okay, if no one's here for an agenda item, we'll move on.
There was something for Chief Coleman.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to move up 7B.
Motion move up 7B.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted, just so that we're not keeping people waiting. Chief Coleman?
That would be me.
Okay.
Thank you for moving that up. It's nice when you have the opportunity to come in and talk to the board about positive things that are happening and acknowledgements and recognition that our employees get. So I am very pleased tonight to let you know that our fire chief, Steve Coleman, has successfully completed a process that awards him a professional designation called a Chief Fire Officer, which is CFO. And this is a very prestigious designation. The Commission on Professional Credentialing met on February 4th to officially confirm the designation upon Chief Coleman. He is one of only 956 CFOs, which is the Chief Fire Officer designation, not to be confused with our Chief Financial Officer, but fortunately we now have 2 CFOs. 956 CFOs worldwide, and only one of 11 in Massachusetts to hold this designation. The CPC, which is the Professional Credentialing Commission, awards the designation only after an individual successfully meets all of the organization's stringent criteria. The process includes an assessment of the applicant's education, experience, professional development, technical competencies, contributions to the profession, and the community involvement. In addition, all applicants are required to identify a future professional development plan. Chief Coleman has been a member of the Mass Fire Service for 24 years and has extensive knowledge of the emergency services profession and has far surpassed critical core competencies for professionals and personnel serving in senior fire officer positions. The CFO designation uses a comprehensive peer review model to evaluate candidates who are seeking this credential. The CPC, the Commission on Professional Credentialing, which is an entity of the Center for Public Safety Excellence, administers this designation program. The CPC consists of individuals from academia, federal and local government, and the fire and emergency medical services profession. So I just want to say I'm very proud of Chief Coleman for his accomplishments and demonstrating to everybody that the town of Auburn really is a leader in professional development for its fire and emergency services. And I want to congratulate him on this really prestigious award. Congratulations.
Steve, congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you. We'll go back to the Board of Selectmen items. The Board of Selectmen goals for 2013. In your packet, you have the 3 goals that were voted on by the board last March. We're, coming in and closing in the year, so I wanted to have a discussion on where we're at on these goals, and then, remind members we'll be looking to set goals for 2014. So the first goal that we set was stay apprised of bylaw review process and the content of recommended changes, additions that are going to town meeting. I don't know if anyone wants to speak to this one before I do, but I can certainly give an update on that one.
Yep.
Okay, so I know I've attended many of the bylaw review committee meetings. I've seen Mr. Holstrom. This is the draft copy for the proposed bylaw revisions for the town. I have to say that the bylaw review committee has done incredible work. Some of these bylaws have not been reviewed since the 80s, so it's a very, very comprehensive review and redraft of the bylaws to bring them up to date. They had a meeting earlier today, at 5 o'clock today, and this is the stage they're at. They have requested that all members review this document for final review, whether it's, everyone's gone through it for typos, et cetera, but as many sets of eyes as looking at it is a good thing. They don't expect any more substantive changes, but if anyone wants to bring any significant changes forward, it needs to be done soon. One of the recommendations is to remove any fees out of the bylaws because they're so out of date. I mean, one of the fees was $1 for something, and it would have to go to town meeting to change. So one of the recommendations to town meeting will be to include a fee schedule that will be set annually, and if, when I say set annually, at least reviewed, and that would be done by the Board of Selectmen for their fees. I believe that some of the fees are also done by the police department. There is going to be a separate town meeting. This is a significant undertaking and review, so that the proposal, I believe, will be a separate town meeting to review this. And the last part is there will be a section in the proposed bylaws that will just simply be Part 3, which will be the current zoning bylaws. They're not undertaking the current zoning bylaws in this because there's just so much that has been reviewed. So, do any members have any comments on our first goal, which I'm happy to say I was able to at least participate in through the whole process?
Well, just in the fact that I attended the bylaw meeting, that how much input there was actually to it. There's a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, and one word out of place, it was called on, and it's being fine-tuned, and I think it's just an extraordinary job that they are doing, and accolades to them for doing it, because it's a major job.
Yeah, and I'll say that, Chairman Mark Moss had all of the department heads in any section that pertained to anyone. There was a separate meeting scheduled, and they went through those bylaws line by line. So they're continue to do an excellent job, and I'm sure they will until the time they bring it to town meeting for adoption. Did you have anything on this?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So the second goal of the Board of Selectmen was in preparation for the annual the annual license renewals, the subcommittee to develop a process to report on the compliance status of all license holders in preparation of the board for review. Unless anyone wants to say anything, I can give us an update on that as well.
Okay, now the subcommittee has been, because we haven't received any report from the subcommittee regarding that as yet.
Well, what we did is we brought it verbally. The subcommittee was in contact with, more so Mr. Burney, and making sure that all of our license holders were in compliance. He worked with Mr. Antinovica to make sure there were no outstanding issues, worked with the CFO to ensure that there were no outstanding tax issues. So I'm confident that what Denise and I brought to the board had a thorough review. Yes, Mr. Grossman.
There's one thing I realize that they're seeing that everyone is in compliance and so on, but we need to be in compliance also as a town, and I think there are we ask that the companies, vendors, whatever you want to call the businesses, are required to have their requests in for their renewals of the licenses by the end of November, and, they go into effect on the 1st of January, and I know of some instances where we went into February and some of the businesses hadn't received their permits yet. So we need to make sure that the department is on top of getting them out in a timely fashion.
Well, the town gets all of the renewals out. All of the liquor licenses need to be voted on by, is it the end of November? So those are done. And if a license holder has a valid license through December 31, we can ask them, we can encourage them to get their applications in early, but they do have until the end of the year to get their renewal in. And a vote of the board was that if they don't have it in by December 31, it was treated as a new application, and we did that.
Yeah, but I'm not referring to just liquor, I'm referring to other license items.
That's what I'm saying,
that are
they,
required, that were in, and they hadn't received copies, that they're supposed to have on the wall when the inspectors come in, and if they're not on the wall and posted, you're under violation.
so I'm sorry, Mr. Grossman, I'm not clear. Are you saying that the town,
Is late in getting out licenses.
Who was that?
Or notifications.
Who's that? And she does it right after the board.
They were on our list, we granted them, and they didn't receive them in a timely manner. So they were already
So usually has
a
them
month
already
into
done,
the
so-
year
So he needs to tell us.
with no
what-
license to be posted on the wall, which is required by state law.
okay.
May I, through the chair, may I ask to Mr. Grossman, could you find out, not for the meeting tonight if you want, but just get us the name of the person that doesn't have that, and we can follow up on it? Because generally, our policy is, our practice is, not policy, that the day after the board takes its vote, we then issue the license the very next day. So if someone didn't get one and it got missed, we need to know what one it is so we can follow up on it and get it to them. So if you want to get that to me.
It might, at this point, they might have it now, but they didn't have it.
Whoever it was, so that we can find out what
You
happened
could-
with it.
Yeah, that way we could track it down and ensure that it wouldn't happen again.
And the last one is to continue to evaluate policies and procedures of the Board of Selectmen, and, I mean, I think that goes without saying. We've had many discussions, proposed policies that we've, voted yes or no on, and we continue to meet as a subcommittee. There were a couple of requests that we will be taking up at the next scheduled subcommittee meeting. Mr. Holstrom?
I do have a question on that. When I attended the bylaw meeting, there was one policy, I believe, that we have, the juice bar law.
Yeah.
There was some discussion about if the town bylaws were going to take that over, it wouldn't have to be a Board of Selectmen policy. Was that ever resolved?
No, it was adopted by town meeting, so
Okay, so
It's
is
the
that something
bylaw.
that we need to keep in our policies then? That's one of the things, because I think we're duplicating the effort, and I want to be sure that, we don't do that. There's no questions or concerns over...
no, we do because they're required to have a license through us.
I see.
It was allowing the juice bar, which, the recommendation at town meeting through, from the bylaw committee would be to change the name to carry an alcohol license, was adopted by town meeting, so it has to stay.
I just want to be sure, we clarified that, because I know that we were talking about that, and it was one that came up in discussion, the meeting I was there, and I don't know if it was ever resolved. So
Yeah.
I just want to be sure I was...
They have to
understood that.
come before us for a license.
Thank you.
So March is here on Saturday, believe it or not, so we'll be looking at setting our goals for the upcoming year, so if members could think about any proposed goals, we will have that on the next agenda. Do we have any member items? Okay, back to town manager items, fiscal year 15 budget.
I am all set, thank you. Through the chair, we had Ed Kazanovich presented early in the evening, so we're good.
Okay, thank you. And you have nothing else for tonight?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, under tabled items, we have Mr. Simonian's discussion on the letter. Mr. Simonian?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I had hoped all the members of the board would be here. That was the reason for postponing this to the last meeting, but it doesn't make any sense to wait any longer. But considering this letter was read a couple of meetings ago and was not on the agenda, so I did want to respond to it because I'm not going to sit quiet and be called a liar, especially when I am the only person who's being honest. But I'd just like to address specific comments that were made in the letter directed at me. This statement misrepresented what I said originally and distorted the facts. In the letter, the chair stated, we are a board, we are not individuals, we take actions not as individuals. If one member of this board disagrees with or takes a position that is counter to another member, we should still treat each other with respect. So, this is a convenient statement to make by the chair, because you can go back and review past meetings, and you'll find several instances over the last few years where I said the same exact thing, and it seems to have fallen on deaf ears. But now that it suits the chair, my statements are conveniently plagiarized and passed off as someone else's attempt to present a unique idea. The next thing that I have issue with, the process was not flawed, manipulated, or ignored. And the paragraph goes on to discuss the legal process and Labor Council's advice. So I want to be completely clear about this, because I did not manufacture anything that happened. It did in fact happen. As far as the process being manipulated, I raised one concern in the fact that a close personal friend of the town manager was one of the people negotiating the contract. I was accused of making personal issues and personal attacks. I just raised the point. My feeling was, with all the back and forth and finger pointing that went on with the original town manager process, I felt that we could have removed any doubt that anything was going on by not allowing this to happen. Further, I raised the concern regarding the vote on the 5-year contract when it was taken, that it did not seem to coincide with the charter.
Mr. Simonian, I'm absolutely going to let you finish, but I just want to caution you at this point, because executive session has not been released.
I understand. This was just done in open session.
Some of it was, something that you just made reference to wasn't, but just be cautious that you don't violate executive session, please.
Okay. The chair, after the vote was taken, the chair and I did speak, and at no time did she indicate she would be asking council to attend the next meeting. We both agreed that it was a matter for council, but I fully expected that policy would be followed and it would be brought to a vote of the board. So there was plenty of time from the time that we had that conversation until the next meeting for a vote to be taken by this board. Moving on. In the letter, it was stated there is no legal issue with the vote. The charter does not address the employment contract. It does address the appointment. And I agree, but again, there is a difference. I did not accuse anyone specifically of voting illegally. I said that I felt the board as a whole may have done something because the numbers were not consistent. The appointment versus the 5-year contract, and I felt that we should at least find out before we proceeded. Again, it doesn't justify violating policy. There was another selectmen meeting scheduled between the time that the chair and I spoke and the next executive session, and therefore it should have been brought to a vote of this board. And it goes on. The statement, which I really, again, goes to the flip-flopping that goes on, that one of the reasons for offering a 5-year contract is that it's very common among town managers, which I find absurd, because at various times, the chair has made the argument that we, Auburn Board of Selectmen, should not do things just because other towns do it. So, regarding the accusation that the chair violated the board's own policy, which she denied, I would just say, no matter how often this is denied, the policy was not violated. The fact is it happened. I have previously demonstrated, I'm not going to get into the whole discussion again, but there are 2 key points to this argument. Number one, if the feeling was that the policy wasn't violated, there would have been no need to amend it. And at the request of the chair, Labor Council was present. He didn't show up out of the kindness of his heart. He was asked to be there. He billed the town, he was paid for it. And then he was asked to provide a ruling on the matter, in which he had a financial interest. If he were to have said that there was in fact a violation, then he would not have been able to bill the town and be paid. So, again, that's absurd and ridiculous. And I will point out one more thing. He is Labor Council. He is not Policy Council. We have never gone to him for policy. That's always been Mr. Henning. So I don't know why we asked him to rule on policy this time. Though I did say we may need to schedule an emergency executive session, I never said that we should do so, bring counsel in, and not ask the board to vote on whether we should have counsel there. When I raised the question, I made it clear that I didn't know if it was an illegal vote. The chair stated that she didn't know either. That happened during our phone conversation. Neither one of us knew what the answer was. In her statement, in her letter, she tried to make it clear that she knew the answer and asked counsel to be there on my behalf. That's not the case. In the written statement, the chair claims that Labor Council offered to attend the next executive session. In the previous paragraph to that, she claims it was in response to me asking for an executive session. In an open meeting, she stated that she decided to invite him. So I'm not sure what the correct reason. There's 3 different reasons given for why Mr. Moskis was there. And I also don't understand the statement in her letter that he offered to be there. If he offered to be there, does that mean we don't have to pay him? Not really sure what that's supposed to mean. Labor Council immediately, I would not have contacted Labor Council immediately if Mr. Simone had not stated there was an urgent legal matter that had to be discussed. I never stated there was an urgent legal matter. Those are the chair's words. I said I felt an illegal vote may have been taken, and neither one of us knew the answer. It was a matter for legal, but the way it was handled was in violation of the existing policy. And I would offer it as an example. If I called the chair and said that a business owner had violated their license, would she show up at the business the next day and revoke the license? Absolutely not. We have a policy for how that's handled, and we follow policy. We had a policy for how Labor Council should be contacted and brought into any issue. That policy wasn't followed. Regarding the seriousness of my allegation, I would respond, yes, it is a serious allegation, as serious as circumventing policy whenever it's convenient to do so. Policy was clear, no consultation of any kind by any member unless the board approves it. Mr. Holstrom argued that it was to protect the taxpayers, but that protection is only as good as the integrity of the people enforcing the policy. At the end of the day, it appears that in Auburn, no words ring more hollow than the phrase, according to Selectmen policy. So, again, to be clear, when I asked an open session on whose authority was council present, the chair stated she had asked council to be present. There was no mention of emergency until after I stated that the board was violating its own policy. As I wind down, finally, I would like to address Mr. Simonian's statement that the chair does not have any more power or authority. And I want you to listen closely to this. Does not have any more power or authority than any other member of this board. While it is true the chair's vote carries the same weight as that of every other board member, the chair does carry additional responsibilities that other members do not have. In that statement, and this is an old political trick, manipulating the terms, offering one and then actually agreeing. I never used the words authority or power. I agreed with exactly what the chair said. The additional responsibilities of facilitating the meeting and setting the agenda absolutely are hers. Never said that anything about authority or anything like that. So, the last thing I want to address is the comments. In closing the letter, the chair mentioned acting together, not making derogatory comments, and I have no problem with either, as I've stated many times. Additionally, during commentary, the chair accused me of playing the victim. And I would offer, in regard to derogatory comments, I know of only 2 outstanding derogatory comments that currently the chair has not addressed. I brought this up before. On 2 separate occasions, Mr. Holstrom's accused the board of being unprofessional and unfair. Although he had no basis in fact for making the accusations, he made them. They've never been addressed. The chair's conveniently let them slide. And so I would say that after sitting here and preaching teamwork and this board acting together, after making that statement in the same meeting, the first 2 things that the chair did was to raise her voice and speak over me when I initially attempted to address the context of this letter. And right after that, I proposed a motion that went unseconded. Now, I offer you, how is that teamwork? As long as I've been on this board, whether I agreed or disagreed, I've at least seconded a motion for discussion. I have never let a motion die on the floor. I've at least given the respect for the other members of this board to second the motion, to at least have a discussion and let them make their case for that motion. So, you can preach what you want, all you want, but if you don't practice what you preach, it's pretty hollow. Thanks.
So hopefully, we can put this issue to
I
bed
hope
now.
so, too.
I will just say I stand by my comments, and now, for anyone who is interested, we have the minutes of the meetings, we have the tapes, we have everything. We have written documents, and I guess people can make their own decisions. Is there any public comment? In your packet, you have the minutes of June 24th, 2013. Are there any corrections or omissions? The chair will accept them as written. In your packet, you have the minutes of July 29th, 2013. Are there any corrections or omissions? Hearing none, the chair will accept them as written. Is there anything else before the board tonight?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.